Let's talk running backs. Where do things stand? RJ Harvey, J.K. Dobbins, Jaleel McLaughlin, and beyond. A little later than I'd expected, but we're here now in the wee small hours of the morning. It's Denver football after dark here as training camp ramps back up. There's RJ Harvey on the left, and there's Jaleel McLaughlin on the right. And they're two of the interesting backs here as the running back competition continues apace. RJ Harvey's got a prominent role, of course. Jaleel McLaughlin is an interesting spot, trying to make himself into a back who has a little more power, and we saw that manifest in breaking a tackle on Saturday night. The penalty on Pat Bryant ensured that it did not go in the stat sheet, but this is why you don't necessarily go by the stats when you evaluate a game, because even though the numbers do tell us a lot, the film will tell you more. And the film in that case told you that Jaleel McLaughlin adding muscle did show you something. And it did manifest in him making a play that he would not have made last year. But that led me to ask Sean Payton about the impact of that additional weight on Jaleel McLaughlin, who of course is heading into his third year as a Broncos running back. By the way, Mace here, hello. Thanks for waiting. Sorry it was a little later than the scheduled time. I know it was up at midnight. I had a couple of tech issues to overcome here, but we're here to talk Denver Broncos football here as training camp ramps back up. A Tuesday practice with shells. Wednesday practice is going to be full pads. Thursday practice, of course, we'll have the Arizona Cardinals coming in for joint practice, which will be the second joint practice of training camp. But I wanted to ask Sean Payton about Jaleel McLaughlin. It was sort of a opening at the end of his press conference. He said one more question, and he was trying to cut it off because he wanted to do his interview with Kay Adams, who'd come in on her national training camp tour. And one more question, and there was a little bit of a pause, and I'm like, okay, fine, if no one else is going to ask a question, I'm going to. Because this has been on my mind ever since Jaleel McLaughlin talked about playing at a heavier weight than he has before. Listed, of course, at 187 pounds, and he talked earlier in training camp about moving up to 199 pounds. And so I asked Sean Payton about that additional weight, especially in light of the fact that you had a play where clearly it manifested in something positive. One of the things that Jaleel McLaughlin struggled with last year was yardage after contact, that he'd get hit and he'd go down. I think we can all remember week 1 in Seattle last year. He's bursts into the open field. It looks like he's got a potential touchdown if he can get by one guy. And of course he couldn't. And plays like that clearly gnawed at him when he studied his film, when he did a lot of self-reflection, and that led him to really focus on that in the weight room. And so it started with me asking Sean Payton about kind of, okay, where did this come from? Was this kind of Jaleel-centered, or was this kind of coach-centered? Where did this come from? And so here's Sean Payton talking about Jaleel McLaughlin playing at a heavier weight and sort of what that led to on Saturday night. Here's Sean Payton getting into that.
It's not a big change, because I'm always mindful for the receivers and the corners and the runners. I see the mistake made often. They come into our league and they have more time over there, and they feel like they have to. And so, it's important that it doesn't change how you run. And so, but he's at a good weight. And look, there's no one that trains as diligently and as hard as he does. He makes, they're able to measure the movements. And so there hasn't been a drop off with where he's at. And so he's on top of, there's nobody more in tune to where their body is than that player.
Couple of things there. First of all, if Sean Payton is talking about Jaleel McLaughlin, he never misses an opportunity to kind of give him a compliment. I remember, a couple of weeks ago, he talks about, he's talking about the running backs, and he's talking about him, and he makes a point of saying, hey, when you get to full tackling, because you go from shells and then it's low contact, and then you go to full pads, and then you're at the thump level, but you're not tackling to the ground, and then you get to preseason games as tackling in the ground, and saying that it was when you got to tackling to the ground 2 years ago that was when Jaleel really popped, and that they knew that that's when they couldn't pass him through the practice squad. And then he's answering the question about Jaleel today, and that's he sort of says, hey, no one's more diligent, with himself. So if he answers a question about Jaleel, he never passes up a chance to kind of give him a compliment. I think that's it's something that's very interesting. But the other thing there in that response from Sean Payton is he talks about there at the end saying that they're measuring the movements. So of course, they've all got the sensors. All the players are, the little thing that they wear on their backs, so they can track all sorts of data with the players and their movements. And he says there hasn't been a drop off with where he's at. And so when Jaleel McLaughlin answered questions about a week and a half, 2 weeks ago, and he said that his speed was the same as it was at the lighter weight, that's what he was referring to. He was referring to that coming from the data. So that's kind of an interesting thing when he's talking about that. That's where he's going. That's what he's discussing. So you have that, and so it gets me thinking, okay, when you hear all that, what does that mean for him roster-wise, and where it stacks up and where he ends up? Does all that make one think his spot on the 53 is secure, or is he on the bubble in this running back mix? I mean, how do we perceive this? Because he isn't, if you look at how they structured the running back playing time on Saturday, Sean Payton divided the game into thirds, and Jaleel was in that second third with Tyler Badie. And now Payton has, of course, referred to Jaleel as the change of pace guy. He's used that phrase with him before. And I think, as we've discussed, the best use for Jaleel McLaughlin going forward may be as that change of pace guy who has a handful of touches a game, not the way they were having to use him down the stretch last year out of necessity, simply because they just weren't getting enough per touch production from Javonte Williams. They had to. You go to the Colts game, for example, before he got injured, and then of course missed the Chargers game. Getting him the ball in the Colts game, as they were, it was a necessity because they needed somebody who could actually produce, and no one else in the backfield was answering the call but him. So even though his body type at the time wasn't suited to handle that workload, it was, okay, there are no other options here. You got to feed him the rock. So, I mean, it's to his credit that he answered the call as well as he could. And I think that's one of the things that I think Sean Payton likes about him, is that Jaleel's very much a guy who, if you ask him to jump, he basically says, "How high, coach?" And you know, you ask him to come in at how early, coach, because he's still the first guy in the building. I mean, Evan Engram has joked about the fact that he wants to be the first guy in, but this number 38 keeps beating him in the building every morning. So it's these little things that make me think that when all is said and done in the equation, that somehow he's probably still going to be on the team when they cut to 53. That even that they're going to find a way to have him on the 53. And my guess is it's going to be 4 running backs on the 53. That's going to be the top 2, RJ and JK, and 38 kind of in his own box, change of pace, and then one of the other 3. Badie, Watson, Estime. Those 3 kind of duking it out for one spot. So, anyway, I guess so. That's where we start here. We start with basically 10 minutes on Jaleel McLaughlin. So, the guy pictured there. So, it's going to be it's a tough decision because I've mentioned this in other places. All of those running backs on Saturday, all the 4 beyond the top 2, the 4 who are battling, the 4 who probably don't have their names in Sharpie beyond RJ and JK, all of them did something that they can say, wow, I did something good. Like Audric Estime, making a guy miss, doing something in the open field, catching a pass, looking a little bit nimble. Okay, that's something he really wasn't doing before. He could feel good about that. Tyler Badie, probably the steadiest of the 4, the most consistent, and certainly the best pass protector. He could feel good about his game. Jaleel could feel good about probably having maybe the single best run of the 4, even though it got taken back by penalty, and especially feeling good about the fact that he had the missed tackle, the broken tackle that, again, the thing that he didn't do very well last year, that he was able to do very well in that game, that he could say, like, okay, man, there's the evidence that all the work I put in the weight room, there is all that work paying off. I mean, that's got to make you feel good when you see all the hours manifesting on the field. Like, that's got to give you a little kind of a nitro boost there. And then, of course, Blake Watson just looking incredibly explosive. And then he had what I thought was maybe his most fun play in the open field after he caught the pass and turned upfield for the first down, getting wiped out by the Frank Crum penalty. But he had to feel good about his game as well. I mean, it was fun. Like, it's fun. Touchdown bonus. Watson's a better receiver. Badie is just as good as Jaleel. He can't. Well, I mean, he's a different kind of runner. I mean, he's designed to be an open field runner. I mean, tough yard. I mean, we say tough yards. Let's define tough yards as kind of up the middle, right, between the tackles, burrowing. If we're talking about tough yards, the guy who can actually get the tough yards most capably is probably Audric Estime, because he can power and burrow his way through of those 4 backs. That's the guy who can probably get them the best. But what does he have in the open field? Tyler Badie probably has the best mix of all the skills. But of those 4, who is the most dynamic getting to the edge? Like this is one thing, and this is what we've seen from Jaleel over the last couple of years. Who is the guy who, if you've got 3rd and goal from the 5, and you say, okay, I want a guy who can get to the corner and get to the pylon ahead of everybody else, the guy who's the most likely to do that of those 4, it's Jaleel, and then probably Blake Watson behind him, even though we haven't seen that in a game yet. But we've actually seen Jaleel do that. We saw him do that as a rookie. So that is another thing to consider as well. Kind of, do they have that ability in the red zone to get to the corner and get you in the end zone fast. So that is something that is something to consider as well. Watson, yeah, the thing with Watson that I liked on Saturday is, again, and this is going to get really personal on my part, but the fact that finally we saw what was on the college film, the Memphis film, the Old Dominion film, the Shrine Bowl film. That's the guy that we saw. That's the running back. That's the guy that probably should have been drafted, and in fact was somebody the Broncos were considering drafting. It would not have been a surprise if Estime had gone off the board before the Broncos picked. It's possible Watson may have been picked right then and there. So Blake was on their radar for a while as someone they were looking at. And I don't know how many of y'all caught the Kay Adams interview today that's on YouTube, but he went back and for the second time he started talking about the definition of joker, and basically he's kind of put the simple definition of joker out there as a running back or a tight end with elite pass catching skills. Okay, Blake Watson is a converted X receiver, and to go back to rookie minicamp in 2024, Sean Payton did say that Blake Watson has some joker potential. Now, for reasons of, say, injury, getting delayed in his camp last year, kind of never really getting untracked, it's not something that we've had a chance to see truly manifest, but we did see some glimpses Saturday night. We've seen it in practice. I mean, when you watch the one-on-one receiver versus linebacker drills, we've seen a couple of those in training camp. The guy who's the best at those is Blake Watson, because he is easily the most refined pass catcher and route runner in that room. And with all respect to everybody else, it's a pretty good distance between him and number two. Jaleel McLaughlin has improved. There was one route that he had, and he got two or three steps, and he had separation, and it was perfect until the ball bounced off his hands. Like he had it. It was in stride in his hands, just dropped it. All there except the finish. It was kind of like the play that Troy Franklin had in the pseudo scrimmage day when he was down the seam and it was in the move the ball, and everything was great except the finish. So two plays that were very similar to that. Everything was right except the end. And Troy's had a chance to have plays that have kind of made up for that, and we have not seen that from Jaleel, at least in the pass catching game. It's something that the Broncos want him to work on. But Blake Watson is a terrific pass catcher. And you do wonder the Broncos have already put Blake Watson through waivers once. They did that last season in October. And I know they kind of held their breath for about 24 hours as he went through that. They didn't really want to put him on waivers. They kind of had to get that roster spot. It's not something they particularly wanted to do, and they were nervous. You wonder if they're going to, when it comes down to it, if they're going to do that again, or if they might be like, I don't know if we want to let that skill out of the building, because I think Sean Payton really likes the pass catching skill set of Blake Watson. So that's another thing I think everybody, just as you're watching this, just keep that in the back of your mind when it gets to cut time, because Sean Payton does have that thing that he's often talked about not wanting to see a guy succeed somewhere else and say, we let him go. And we know he is expounded about Blake Watson. He could not stop talking about him in the production meeting before the Charger game, and Kirk Herbstreit just went on talking about all the things that Sean Payton said about Blake Watson when Blake got the ball, and then he just kind of let it flow about the compliments that Payton was paying this guy about, the skills that he had and what he could be. And so I think that's something to kind of keep in mind, that this is somebody that Sean Payton does see as someone who maybe could be a joker. And we know how Sean Payton likes his jokers, and we know how he thinks they're so hard to find. And so if you have somebody that has those traits that maybe is in there in the building, does he want to take a chance on letting that guy go? So anyway, so that is something to think about. Touchdown bonus. Bet Watson doesn't pass waivers. Well, he did in October, but it's a really different dynamic at the cut to 53. And the reason is because at that moment, everybody is rethinking their rosters. Another thing to consider is the element of having a former assistant general manager who's with the New York Jets and having other people who are, for example, with the Raiders. You had like Mark Fuse, who had worked here, who's now with the Raiders. So you've got people who have left the Broncos building recently who are with other teams, who if there are guys that are let go that were around last year, and they may say, hey, this guy is on the market. I can tell you this guy can play. This guy can play. That's something to keep in mind as well as we get to this. Whoa. Oh, man. Thoughts on keeping JK, RJ, Badie, and Watson only? Ooh. Man alive. That's interesting. I mean, it would surprise me. It would surprise me just based on the way that Sean Payton always talks about Jaleel McLaughlin. I think that one cutting Jaleel might hurt him a little bit, because that's a guy that has kind of done everything he's asked him to do. He's been asked to do, and then some over the years. And also Jaleel McLaughlin, I don't think he's eligible for waivers because he's only a third-year guy, so he's not a vested veteran. Of course, Tyler Badie is not a vested veteran either. The other thing that kind of looms over this is, do the Broncos play a game of saying which guy is more likely to pass through waivers? That is the other thing that kind of comes into this. And it's where the Tyler Badie conversation comes in, because he has gone through waivers multiple times over the years, and he is now four draft classes removed, because he's class of 02, so it's, or 3 draft classes removed, so it's 03, 23, 24, 25. So there's now been 3 crops of running backs since he came into the league. And especially at that position, at that point, if you are waived, you're kind of yesterday's news if you're on the market, especially when you've been a practice squad player for most of your career, as Tyler Badie has. So that is another thing that may come into play. I've tossed this out there, the notion that Tyler Badie may get waived, go to the practice squad, but effectively be your third running back, as in if he passes through the practice squad, something happens to RJ Harvey or JK Dobbins, and then you do the game of elevation, there's your 3, and then if you need more beyond that, you simply move him up to the 53 at that point, and you create a roster spot another way. We know how the Broncos like to play that game with the elevations. They manipulate that very well. Now, of course, he's not a vested veteran, so if you waived him and somebody else claimed him, he'd have to report. If he were a vested veteran, kind of like with Michael Burton, you can just say, hey, you know what? we're going to elevate you 3 times, then you're going to be on the 53. Don't worry about it. If you're a vested veteran, you don't have to go anywhere if a team can't claim you. It's your choice what to do. That's why when they cut to 53, I expect they will probably release Michael Burton like they did last year, sign him to the practice squad, and then do elevation, 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 and then back to the 53. So I think they'll play that game with Burton again. But with Tyler Badie, because he's not a vested veteran yet, he doesn't have enough experience, you would sit there and you would wait for 24 hours, and then if he passed through waivers, then you could put him on the practice squad, and then again, he could be your RB3. So that is something that I think is actually in play here. If the Broncos want to roll the dice, they could say, hey, maybe we don't want to let Blake Watson out of the building, and we'll take the chance on Badie passing through waivers and then bring him back. That is something that actually I could see happening, potentially. So, can other teams poach a player after they've been elevated if they aren't put on the 53? Okay, so they can absolutely they can. Like if the player's out of elevations and they go back to the practice squad, then they can poach a player, but the team that has the player on the practice squad immediately has the option of elevating them to the 53. So like, let's say, but they can do that even before, players on the practice squad. So let's say, and this has happened, the Broncos have lost players to, the Broncos have lost players too. And I'm going to answer the question about the punter. Derek, by the way, thank you for the super chats. I've gotten a couple of them today, so I appreciate them both. So Derek, I'm going to answer the question about the punter in a second. So you've got a player on the practice squad, and this has happened a few times over the years. So a player is on the practice squad, and another team says, "Hey, we want you. We want you to come aboard." So that player can then go to the team that they're on and say, "Hey, you want me? And that team has the option of keeping that player if they immediately elevate them to the 53. And then if not, then they're free to go. They're basically free to go to that other team and then go to their 53. So anyway, Derek asking, at what point do they bring in a punter to compete? They're not there yet. Like that's something that I think is a ways off here, to be honest with you. I do not think that is that's happening. We were talking about this at practice today, and because we were discussing this, a couple of us reporters. I actually think that is something that maybe happens 3 or 4 weeks into the regular season. I think they're going to let this play out. And actually, I'm going to play a comment from Sean Payton, and I want y'all to listen to this and say, does this sound like a guy who is looking to bring in anybody to challenge anytime soon? Here's Sean Payton talking about Jeremy Crawshaw.
And it's just game day experience. You know, it was funny. Both he and Morstead were there, and Thomas, I told you guys I had a chance to draft him in New Orleans in 2009. And so, God, I don't know what year it is for him now, 18. But he was a 5th-round pick, and he came up to me afterwards, and he just went on about having a chance to meet our guy and then watch his flexibility. He just said, and Thomas has done this long enough. He said, "Man, you really got a good one," and so it's working through some of those things that we do with rookies. but you guys see it, and him getting used to the game situations, and that he's got a bright future.
Yeah. They're trusting the big sample size on this right now, on Jeremy Crawshaw. And the broad sample size says that when he's in practice, like he had 2 punt periods today. One was a placement punting period, and every single one of those punts was north of 4.65 in hang time. And all but one of the punts was 13-yard line on in the placement period. So he was doing a very good job there. And in the full field punting period, like 6 of the 9 had hang times north of 4.7. Most of 6 of the 2/3 of them were 55 plus in yardage. I mean, okay, he's killing it far more often than not. So that's what they're going by. They're not I don't think they're worried right now about him. I think they're looking at that first game and saying, okay, it was 3 punts. First time, jitters. Especially if Sean Payton's talking to the punter that he trusts the most in the world, Thomas Morstead, the guy that was with him in New Orleans. And believe me, like when Sean Payton has a kicker or punter that he trusts, like Will Lutz, like Sean Payton went through an average of a kicker a year in New Orleans until he got Will Lutz. And since then, aside from the year that Will Lutz was hurt, he's had one guy. That's it. When Lutz was injured, like it was, again, went back to the kind of the, just going through guys to figure it out. But he found his guy, like in Lutz, and that was it. He was secure. So he talks to Thomas Morstead, and Morstead tells him, like, you've got the guy. So I think right there, that means Sean feels pretty good about his investment in Crawshaw. So I think there's going to have to be quite a few more shaky moments for him to lose his long-term faith in Crawshaw. Like he said, like he'll tell you, like, okay, there's the occasional firework that doesn't like he said a couple of weeks ago when I asked him about Crawshaw, but he still kind of gets that sparkle in his eye when he talks about him. Like I think he knows he's got somebody who can be really special if they can just ride out this moment and get him to be consistent. I think it's sort of the same thing with Bo Nix. Like it's kind of like if he knows he's got somebody that he believes is special, that he'll ride it out in the short term. So anyway. Oh man, Michael, you did not have to do that. You did not have to do that. But thank you, man. Anyway, I'm flattered. Like that is, I'm not doing this for the bucks, because I'm doing this for the reps. I'm doing this for the conversation, and I'm doing this for, to get me thinking. Honestly, there are times I actually get story ideas, show ideas, even I've gotten a couple of question ideas from this, and I'm sure I'm going to continue to get more question ideas, especially as we get into the season and we get out of, like, the unfortunate thing right now is that basically everything is press conference format. And when we get into the season and we actually start being able to go into the locker room and get like smaller group interviews and one-on-one interviews more often, that's when I'll actually really be able to ask a lot more questions of players. And so that's where I really think I'll really get more ideas on things to ask of some guys as well. And that's going to come out of this. So that's one thing I'm really, really looking forward to as well. So man, I really appreciate it. I love you guys too. I really do. Dark horse to make the roster on offense. Well, he was on the practice squad last year. He's having a pretty good camp. I thought he played well on Saturday. That's Nick Gargiulo. on the interior offensive line. That's a guy that I think has a chance to stick as one of the backup interior offensive linemen. I think he's got a chance to move his way up from practice squad to the 53 this year, and maybe even has a chance to be someone you're talking about, perhaps, if long term, if you're talking about maybe making a change at left guard in 26 or beyond. I think Gargiulo has a chance to push there at some point. So that's a name that that's a name I'd keep an eye on. And someone actually just mentioned it in the chat. I think, yeah, that's to kind of clue you in on some of the chatter that a few of us have on the sidelines as we're watching practice. Yeah, there's a lot of, from those of us who are watching closely, there's some concern about the form of Ben Powers. I would say that's something that I think a lot of us in the media share based on what we've seen in camp and what we saw on Saturday as well. So that's something to keep an eye on. Again, it's training camp, and so I prefer to be patient and kind of let things play out. It's especially also with Zach Strief and how he does like to let guys kind of try things out, experiment in camp before kind of settling into things. So I say, all right, let's kind of be patient here. And we also do know that the O-line did not start all that great last year, the first game and a half, and then really rounded into form and became arguably the best offensive line in football. So, I mean, I like to kind of settle back and be patient and not jump to conclusions. But you do have, there are some reasons, I think, for concern, especially as you're going to more wide zone, and wide zone maybe there's not something that suits him as well going forward. That's another thing. Is it a skill set? It is a skill set thing. And I think that's something that is the case. So, Emotional Support Viking says, mostly Powers or Wattenberg. I'd say probably it's a little more the guard spot. The other thing on Wattenberg is, remember, he was drafted in 22 when the Broncos were doing a lot of wide zone. So as they bring in some wide zone principles, I think Luke's gonna be very comfortable with that. So I'm not too worried. I'm sorry, as I jostle the camera with my foot here. Sorry there. I got a little enthusiastic there. So I'm not low key tonight for some reason. I wonder why. But I think Luke's going to be fine. So, and let's see how Ben Powers adapts. I mean, he's not been bad the last couple of years. I mean, he's still a part of an offensive line that was arguably the best in football. So we just kind of sit back here and see where it goes. Anyway, Borsman, I'm a huge hater in general, but you're still the most knowledgeable person on the beat. I appreciate that. I'm not sure that I am. I think there's some that bring a lot as well. But I appreciate that. Sometimes I don't know what I'm looking at. One thing I will say is that over the years, I have just tried to learn a lot and gather a lot from people who know more than me, especially like years ago. Just tried to, as I was really getting into this, just tried to listen to people who knew more than I did and take a lot in and just soak a lot up. And between that, from that, and growing up, just kind of study. I just tried to study as much as I could and take in as much as I could for years and years and years. And some of it's my own observations. Some of it, I'll admit, I read and studied as much as I could. Like, some people read the classics. When I was a kid, I was reading Paul Zimmerman's Thinking Man's Guide to Football. We can debate the merits of Paul Zimmerman because there are some people who believe he kept Broncos out of the Hall of Fame, but he certainly did know his stuff, even though he probably had a New York bias, did the late Dr. Z. So, but I was, you know, I've always been keen. I've always kind of been keen to get, like, soak in as much as I could. And I'm still trying, and I'm still learning. I'm still figuring things out. That is the other thing. Never stop trying to expand what you know, and never be closed-minded. Like, that is the one thing. Like, I just try to make sure that I just try to make sure I never say that I have all the answers, and I can be wrong. And I've been wrong a million times before, and I'll be wrong a million times again. Because here's the thing. The things that we know now, they're going to change over and over again. The game today is different than it was 15 years ago. I mean, just go back and watch watch tape from 2010, and the game is different now than it was then. I mean, like, quarterbacks are different now than they were then. Standards are different now than they were then. That's why I have somewhere on one of my external hard drives over there, I have a file that is era adjusted passer rating, because it's the only I have to do that because it's the only way I can do anything that measures across time, because there's no other way to compare things across decades, because if you do a straight up measurement then and now, it doesn't work. I mean, it was like something came up that when Drew Lock was quarterbacking, of how, like, oh, he's got a similar stat line to John Elway in 1983 or 84. I'm like, that's not good, because the standards of 2020 are not the same as the standards in 1984. So anyway, that's that's my TED talk for the night. So anyway, touchdown bonus. Bidet was with the Ravens. Yeah, he was with the Ravens. No, there are people that don't like. It's nothing wrong with them. I'm not for everybody. That's okay. Have you seen that next step where all hope Nix is taking after Saturday, and now I'm hearing he's making head-scratching mistakes? I'm getting a bit spooked. I'll say this. The throw at the end of practice today, not a good decision. I was encouraged by the comments he made after practice when he was on with Kay Adams. I do like the fact that he has the self-awareness to reflect and say, I didn't bring it this day. I was missing something today. I was off today. That sort of thing. I like that he can turn inward and realize I had something missing today. I appreciate that. Is something that I think is a quality that players need, that quarterbacks need to have, that everybody as a person needs to have, frankly. It's training camp. He's going against a rigorous defense. I'm not there. I'm not at that point right now of spook, concerned, anything like that. What I'm seeing is somebody who's operating under duress, but I'm seeing a guy who is not folding under pressure. I'm not seeing it. I'm seeing someone who's processing quickly. I'm seeing someone who's decisive, even though right now, again, like at the end of practice, it wasn't the right decision. But I'm also seeing I'm seeing somebody who's learning. So this is why last year, when he got off to the poor start, I was like, okay, let's just step back and let's see where it goes. Let's see the arc here. And that's why I know we all want to kind of judge things day to day, week to week. It's hard to sit back and say, okay, let's take things in a broader sample size. Let's just let things play out. But sometimes that's just what you have to do. We can talk about it moment to moment, and we can talk about the day-to-day and the things that happen day-to-day. But in terms of how we analyze them, We have to analyze them in the broader sample size. We talk about the events day to day, but we analyze them in the broader context. If that makes any sense? That is what I'm going to try to do. Try my best to do, and not get caught up in the ups and downs of day to day, and focus on kind of what the pattern is. What the pattern is over weeks of training camp. So that's where I'm going with this. I'll say this. If we are sitting here after Saturday night, and let's say Thursday doesn't go well, and let's say Saturday doesn't go well, and that's on top of a rough game against the 49ers, and then the joint practice against the 49ers, he was sacked a couple of times. I thought there was more good than bad for him in the end sum. So I would say, though, that if it's rough on Thursday, if it's rough on Saturday against the Cardinals, then maybe there's probably a little bit of a conversation, perhaps, that could be had, especially because at that point his preseason is almost certainly over, because in all likelihood that third game belongs to the backups in New Orleans, because that's what the way it was last year as well. So it would probably make everybody feel very good if he goes out there on Saturday night against the Cardinals and tears it up. I think it would be the security blanket that everybody wants. So Denver football after dark here on this Tuesday morning. Arvada Orange, have all captains have been picked? Wondering if the Niners do and Ingram have that C on the jersey. They don't announce the captains until just before the regular season. I mean, basically, now the captains that they had out there for the game last Saturday, I mean, they were basically very similar. They were similar to the ones last year. I believe they also had Hufanga there, if I'm not mistaken. I'm going to go back and cheat here because I had it. I'm going to go back and check my notes here just to confirm really quick who the captains were, because I did write them down. Hang on, hold please. Surtain, Jones. No, okay, so they had DJ Jones was out there as well. DJ Jones was out there, and Talanoa Hufanga, because Hufanga, of course, was of course with the 49ers, of course. So hang on. Let me just check one more thing here. Yep, DJ Jones. Yep, that's right. So, yeah, I was just making sure it was the right Jones. Because it could have been Brandon Jones. I just typed Jones. Whoops. No, but it was DJ. And, of course, DJ going back to San Francisco. Talanoa Hufanga going back to San Francisco. But Mike McGlinchey didn't get the captaincy going back to San Francisco. So, I don't know. Maybe it was the pool party. So, I know there's some chatter about Frank Crum. I'm waiting to see it a little bit more from Frank Crum. I was disappointed in the downfield penalty that Frank Crum had on Saturday night. I think touchdown Bo Nix, you're saying it best. Great in run blocking. So in other words, Frank's great going forward, driving, retreating. That needs some work. My guess is that he obviously was somebody they kept on the 53 last year. If I were making a guess right now, I think he would probably end up going through waivers and to the practice squad. I don't know that he's going to be on the 53 this time around. I'm not sure that there's room for him this time, but we'll see. Dennis, running backs that they're going to keep, I would say it's going to be four running backs that they keep. So, anyway. Oh man, Ignacio, you had to use the Tommy Boy reference, didn't you? Oh my gosh. Oh, goodness gracious. Bo Nix and Cortland Sutton looking like be best friends forever. Yeah, I guess we saw that interview with Kay Adams, didn't we? Therein lies a reason why I think they wanted to get Cortland Sutton signed. I think part of that is keeping Bo happy, keeping him with his guy. So sometimes that's reason enough to re-sign a receiver, keep the quarterback happy, keep things harmonious, and also you can afford to pay Cortland Sutton while you have a cost-controlled quarterback. It certainly gives you a luxury now with your receivers, your young receivers. You've got a surplus. I mean, look, I've sort of spitballed the notion that with all those young receivers, I mean, is there room for all of them? Do you end up maybe trading one of them at some point? I mean, I think that's something that maybe you do end up thinking about. I don't think maybe right now, but maybe a year from now, if you just say, okay, I mean, there just may not be room for everybody in the mix, but it's finding out. But again, you don't want to let talent out of the building. So it's figuring out maybe which one you don't want to let out of the building and which one you can say, okay, we're fine maybe letting that player move on. And so I'd say probably that maybe determining that is one of the things that happens this season. And you learn that on the practice field as well from what you see out of these guys. So anyway, Denver football after dark here on this Wednesday morning. Gosh, Tuesday night, Wednesday morning. I don't even know what day it is. You know what that tells me? Mace is tired. Mace is probably ready for bed. I've got 3 pieces up at denversports.com right now. If you go over there and want to do a little late night or early morning reading, whenever you get this. One is on Jeremy Crawshaw, and also a few leftover notes from yesterday. One is on our friend A.T. Perry, friend of the program, and the fact that he was back off the physically unable to perform list, working in individual periods on Tuesday. He's got a tough road ahead of him because the receiver room is crowded, and I think the best case scenario for A.T. Perry is probably practice squad. I still think the best play for him would have been to say, okay, let's just kind of slow play his return. But health-wise, he's ready to go. He passed the physical. There's only so much manipulation you can do. The league kind of checks on these things. And so if he's healthy, they got to kind of work him back out there. So he's practicing. He was moving well today. Look, you rewind the clock back to 2 years ago when A.T. Perry was in this offense. Pete Carmichael, now on the Broncos staff, was running the Sean Payton offense in New Orleans 2 years ago. And A.T. Perry was averaging 20.5 yards a catch, 12 receptions, 4 touchdowns. So there's definitely something there with him. He is the kind of big-bodied target that Sean Payton, he's a central casting Sean Payton receiver in terms of frame. And when I asked Payton about him today, the thing he threw in there, he's smart. So that's another thing. He wants a big-bodied receiver, and he wants a smart player. So it's check. So the thing is there room for him on the 53? No, probably not. Do they find a way to get him on the practice squad? I think there's probably a spot for him on the practice squad. There was last year. I think Pete Carmichael, who was a big reason why Perry chose to come here. New Orleans cut him, was trying to get him back to the practice squad, and Pete Carmichael basically lobbied Perry to get him here. And then, as Perry told me back in January, Sean Payton kind of said, we got a plan for you here. And one thing he said was Sean Payton helped me fall in love with football. Really, he was frustrated at the way things went in New Orleans last season, and that the Broncos kind of helped, and Peyton and Carmichael really helped him kind of rekindle his passion for the game again. So, I think if all things kind of work out for him, it probably ends up practice squad and kind of continuing to develop and continuing to kind of marinate and see where he goes. But that's another name in the mix. It's an incredibly deep receiver room that the Broncos have. I mean, they've probably got, you throw A.T. Perry in the mix now, and they've probably got at least 8 NFL quality receivers in that room. And there's just not, even with the practice squad, there's just not going to be room for everybody. So it's tough. It's an incredibly deep room. I mean, one of the guys who made a great play today was Joaquin Davis. Like he was going against Gregory Jr., the new guy who came in. He's running a drag route, gets 2 steps on him. Ellinger just places the pass perfectly and then just turns upfield. And Joaquin he's got 4.36 speed. He was timed at that. And he's got this incredible stride once he gets in full gallop. I mean, when he gets the ball in stride, all of it, like he just can get 40 yards in a hurry. And he has had, I believe he's had 1 drop that I've seen in practice. Most of the time when the ball hits his hands, it's like Velcro. And he's still kind of raw. But he did have a nice block on Saturday. I still think they find a way to sneak him. I still think he's on the practice squad just because the measurables on him are so ridiculous, and I think they want to find a way to to keep turning the page on him. So appreciate the thoughts, Michael. Appreciate all of you being here. Was it 14-4? I'm doing this off the top of my head. 12-4, 14-4. Either way, it's a ridiculous rate. It wasn't 4-4 like Caleb Lohner back at Utah. So there's some reason Estime won't make the team. If he doesn't make the 53, it'll be okay. If he doesn't make the 53, it would be because he doesn't have as much burst as the other running backs, and even though he's got power, and size, he's not as good of a pass protector as Tyler Badie, and Badie is the equal of him in terms of being able to burrow for tough yards in between the tackles. Now, Estime's got some power, so he can slam up in there and get some tough yards, but Badie, being a bit more compact, can still kind of get those yards up between the tackles. If you need to get like a 1 or 2 burrow type yards up the middle, he can do that. So does Estime bring anything for you that other running backs can't? I think that's something that kind of comes into play. And it's tough. I mean, I like all these guys. It's hard. It's hard because you talk to these guys, you have conversations with them in the locker room. You like them. Like they're all. The one thing about this team last year, it wasn't just that they were an emerging team. It was that they were a pretty good bunch of people. And I personally hate the idea of Audric Estime not being on this team because I like him. I hate the idea of Blake Watson not being on this team because I like him. I like Tyler Badie. I like all these guys. So J.K. Dobbins is a great dude. R.J. Harvey is someone who, he's who I like. It's hard. These are people I like. So, it's another reason why I'm probably the wrong person to ask about these things, because I don't want to see any of them go. Like, and I've always liked Jaleel. I mean, they've given me time. They've answered my questions. They've they're kind. They're nice. They're nice to talk with, and so I don't. So again, you have to be impartial, but on a human level, I like them as people. So that is one thing. The thing about this, even though we cover them, these are guys like here's how I'll say it. when practice is done at camp, I go and I record my stand-up over in one corner of the facility off in near a parking lot. And I walk through the player parking lot by the weight room, and inevitably I end up seeing players as they're going back to the main building from the weight room, and I say hello, hi, how you doing, that kind of thing. It's like, you see these guys in the locker room, and if you see them, these are people that I'm familiar enough with. I just say, hey, they say, hi, how you're doing to me. I say that to them, just like people that you pass in the hallway at work or whatever. That's if I were to bump into these guys at a grocery store or something, I would say, hey, hey, what's up? How you doing? They'd say the same thing to me probably. Like that's just kind of how it is. And that's why, like, for me, if you get to you talk with these guys and, on an acquaintance level, it's like, you don't want to see them the cut day is hard when you see you see this happen. It's part of the business. As Adam Troutman said, it's cutthroat, but man, it sucks. So, and that's sometimes why I'm the wrong person to ask about this, because I get a little sensitive about it. So it's the culture they're building. That's why it's hard. Yeah, it should be hard, And that's why the only way to do it is you just got to, when you do it, it's like in the scene in Moneyball. You can't do it where you talk around it. You just got to say, hey, got to let you go. They'll deal with the paperwork. It was hard. Like if you saw the Bengals Hard Knocks back in 2009, and it was as blunt as a spoon when Jim Lippincott walked up to J.D. Runnels' dorm at like 4:30, 5 o'clock in the morning and knocked on his door and said, they're letting you go and the van's going to be there at 7 a.m. to pick you up and we need your playbook. That was harsh, but and that we only cut players based on ability. That's the only reason. It's like, but as Brad Pitt said in Moneyball, we should rather get a bullet to the head or 5 to the chest and bleed to death, so Mace Payton's performance. By the way, thank you, Derek. I appreciate it, man. You guys are way too kind. Much more than a guy like me deserves. So that's all I can say. Thank you. Like I said, I'm not doing this for the money. Payton's performance in the draft has been stellar, not to mention team-friendly contracts. Has he escaped the Russ signing? Yes. The trade. He has. We are at the point now where there's so much on one side that he has escaped the Russ trade and the Hackett hire. Like that is the twin things of the twin moves of 2022 that could well have sunk him and very nearly did. He's overcome them. And he's actually, I think he's a really good general manager for Sean Payton, because I think he balances out Sean's impulses. That you've got Sean Payton, who would always prefer to kind of go up and sell the farm and, be bold and trade your draft capital and just willy-nilly do this. And George Payton is the more darts guy. He'd move down. And I think what we've actually seen is we've seen balance. We've seen the two sides kind of canceling each other out and meeting in the middle. And I would probably tend to be more of a more darts guy myself. I think there's actually some analytic studies that say that's kind of the way to go. And certainly I point to the 2021 draft where you took 1 third-round pick and made it into 2, and you got Baron Browning, who was pretty good. Injuries caught up to him, but he was pretty good, pretty productive for a while here. And then you got Quinn Miners, who's just been astounding we may be talking about him as the best guard ever to play for this team. And there's an example of the more darts theory working. So I think Sean Payton needs George to kind of channel him a little bit. I think the two of them need each other. I would actually say maybe Sean needs George. Is what I would say. And I like the two of them together. It is also worth noting, though, George Payton signed a 6-year contract. This is year 5. So that's we talk about all these contracts with players. There's another contract that needs to get done. Another contract extension renewal. That's GP. So that's one to get done. Bring him back. Get it done because he's got the goods. NFL will regret letting the Broncos get Greenlaw and Hufanga on the defense and Ingram on the offense. Yeah. By the way, what is interesting about Ingram, he's having a good camp. If knock on whatever surface you can find, there's a 50-50 chance in any season that your backup quarterback has to play meaningful snaps. If Jarrett Stidham has to play meaningful snaps this season, I said this on OBT, and I'm going to say this here. If Stidham has to start a game, start Evan Ingram if you have him on your fantasy team. Because those two, when they are together, they are having shared moments out there. They are on the same page. If Stidham starts a game and Ingram's in the lineup, I think he's going to get at least 10 targets in that game. They are connected. Nix and Ingram are going to make some plays, but Stidham and Nix, if they play a game together, or Stidham and Ingram, if they play a game together, I think Ingram's going to lead the team in targets and receptions that day. Those two make plays together a lot. Stidham, by the way, is having a great camp. I can say this with certainty. If Stiddy has to start, I don't think the Broncos are in a white flag moment. I think they still have a chance to win. I'm not going to say, oh, they're done for, they're screwed. Nope. I think they got a chance with number 8. Feel confident in that. So, the reason they connect better than Nix and Ingram. Well, I think it's more that Nick, that Bo spreads the ball around. Part of it, you see. Like Cortland Sutton will get more snaps with Bo, for instance. I think you see more of the backups receivers with Stiddy. It's just kind of how they're rotating the tight ends. But I guess for some reason, sometimes it just works that way. They click. It's not that Nix and Ingram don't click. They do. But Stidham and Ingram seem to kind of have a sixth sense together. I can't explain it, but just whenever they're out there, when they're on the field together, they seem to make good things happen together. They had a nice play today. It's like you see it coming. So it's fun to watch the two of them together. So anyway, Stidham can be our Osweiler. Yeah, he might be. And there's a history of Sean Payton backups when they've been in the system for a while, they do pretty well. And on that note, that's a good place we're talking confidence in the backup. Hopefully it doesn't come to that. Hopefully Bo Nix stays healthy, but that's a good place to bring this in for a landing so I can get some sleep in advance of full pads on Wednesday morning, 10 a.m. Mountain Time. The Broncos are practicing. We'll have it all covered for you at denversports.com, and I'll have things on social media. I'll have my wrap on Wednesday afternoon, and, of course, Orange and Blue Today at 5 p.m. on the Denver Sports social channels, and, of course, at YouTube on the Denver Sports channel, and I'll have my written stories at denversports.com on Wednesday night, and the joint practice on Thursday with the Arizona Cardinals. And thanks for watching, of course, and like, comment, share, subscribe, and if you have some friends that might enjoy this kind of Broncos talk, hey, tell them about this channel. And, of course, tell them about my stand-ups that I've got every day. They can watch them here. They can watch them on the Denver Sports Facebook channel. They can watch them on my Twitter as well, and on Threads and on Blue Sky. Just wherever. Just tell them to search for Mace Denver, M-A-S-E Denver. That's where they can find all of my stuff. Appreciate you guys joining me, whether it's live here in the wee small hours of the morning or on delay sometime on Wednesday or whenever you're watching this. So I'm grateful for you joining me, grateful for all of you for checking this out. And so until next time, take care. Thanks for watching, and I will see you on Wednesday night. Take care, everyone.